Welcome to the Lincoln County News 2019 Candidates Forum with Robert Butler and Sandra O'Farrell, candidates for selectmen in Waldoboro. My name is J.W. Oliver. I'm the editor of the Lincoln County News, and I look forward to a lively discussion tonight about current issues in Waldoboro. I want to thank the town of Waldoboro for allowing us to use this space and for providing the refreshments. Hope you all saw those on your way in and take advantage of them on your way out. Thank you to you, the audience, for being here and for bringing your questions. And last but not least, thank you to Mr. Butler and Mrs. O'Farrell for your willingness both to serve your community and to participate in this forum. Before we begin, I'm going to go over the format. We're going to start with introductions and opening statements by each candidate. For the bulk of the forum, the audience and I will take turns asking questions. And I have only two criteria for audience questions. They should be relevant and they should be respectful. Then finally, we'll have closing statements, and I expect to wrap up by around 7:30. Each time they speak, the candidates will have up to 3 minutes. I'll hold up a yellow card at 30 seconds and a pink card when your time's up. So this time limit should give us time for at least 10 questions. Without further ado, we'll begin the introductions, and I'd like to start with Mrs. Farrell.
Hi, I want to thank JW, Lincoln County News, and Julie Kaiser for allowing this forum to happen here. I'm Sandy O'Farrell. My husband Jim and I have lived in Maine for over 42 years, mostly in Waldoboro. But I want to start to give you a little back history of my career. I worked for the state of Maine for 15 years for the Veterans Services and 7 years for Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. For Veterans Services, I advocated for the veterans for their benefits. I was on the Agent Orange Commission, and I also scheduled burials for the Veterans Memorial Cemetery. Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, I supervised the bookkeeping and licenses for the state. I don't know if anybody remembers 25 years ago, the pink hunting license, that was me. Okay, both positions, I held supervisory and managerial positions, and I was responsible for staff and budgets. I also worked at H&R Block as a taxpayer and learned a lot about budgeting and fiscal responsibility. All along, community service has been a passion of mine. So I went to focus now on some of the things I've done in Waldoboro. I served on the board of directors for RSU 40 for 9 years. I am the chair of the Facilities Maintenance and Transportation Committee. I was implemented the energy efficiency program that has saved Waldoboro taxpayers money every year since it started and guarantees savings for each year. And if we don't have it, they're going to give us a check. So I was also part of the team that developed the RSU 40 10-year comprehensive plan. And as a board member, I am glad to be part of addressing the opiate problem in our community with a new program for addicts and families that's being sponsored at the high school. In addition to my school board work, I've co-hosted suppers for the food pantry for over 10 years. I've helped organize and fundraised over $10,000 for the Heat and Assistance Program. I helped raise $3,500 for the restoration of the Broad Bay Church, which is across from the Waldorf Theater, and I'm involved in the Clothes Closet in town. I have been a member of the Lions Club for over 10 years, and I'm currently the assistant treasurer. You know, sometimes you do something that makes the papers notice it, and sometimes you don't. It all adds up and helps keep Waldoboro a vibrant community and our businesses successful, and our kids get a better education. I personally understand the struggles of raising a family and the importance of improving the economic opportunities. As periodically, my husband Jim has had to leave the state to make a living. So between my personal experience, the challenges of raising my kids, I've learned a lot about fiscal responsibility. Now I'd like to serve on the Waldoboro Select Board and will make fiscal responsibilities a high priority for our town. I hope after you hear me speak tonight that you will support me on June 11th. Thank you.
Thank you. And before, I forgot one announcement before we go to Mr. Butler. There was a hearing on a tax increment financing district that was supposed to be in this room tonight, that's been moved to another room here in the municipal building, I think in the firefighters' training room. So if anyone's here for the tip hearing, that's down the hall somewhere. Okay, Mr. Butler, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Bob Butler. I'm running for a second consecutive term on the Waldoboro Select Board. I want to thank Mr. J.W. Oliver and Lincoln County News for agreeing to organize this discussion tonight. Many of you already know that my wife Sally and I moved ourselves and our company, the Jojoba Company, to Waldoboro in 2005. We chose Waldoboro then for the same reasons we choose it now, were we to make the decision all over again. It's accepting of people who are newly arrived here. It offers a quality of life, even in the winter, that can't be beat. And it's a fascinatingly diversified town with a beautiful working river as its geographical and economic backbone. I've lived and worked in a lot of different places, but Waldoboro is the place we've made our home for going on 15 years. We're glad we did. So you might ask, why on earth are you running for the select board again? The simple reason is that we're in the middle of things and much remains to be done. Our town manager's been on the job for only 2 years, and I'd like to continue the working relationship we forged to keep Waldoboro moving forward. We're in the process of repurposing the A.D. Gray site, either the building or the land or both. The old Sylvania site is now under discussion as a possible site for a solar project. We've just completed a far-reaching discussion about poverty, food insecurity, opioids, education, unemployment and underemployment, and a host of other issues in Waldoboro. Included in that discussion were more than 90 people from all parts of town, a diverse cross-section that was fairly representative of Waldoboro's population. We learned a lot. We have a lot to think about as we move forward. My hope is that a better understanding of the issues we face and the appointment of a community navigator will result from the effort. The Madomic River, thanks to the efforts of the Shellfish Committee and others, is cleaner than it's ever been. But we still have more to do, and we can't do it alone. These are just a few of the things we've been working on. The job isn't done. We have a lot more to do. I ask you to allow me to continue the privilege of having your trust to work on these and other issues. Thank you.
Thank you. So my first question is going to go to Mr. Butler now. You mentioned A.D. Gray School. School's now been vacant for 10 years now, and town officials have told us that the condition of the building is rapidly deteriorating. What should the town do with the school?
Good question. I remember the first time I was on the board, we were talking about selling it for $1, and we had no takers until the very last moment. And the Y came in and didn't buy it for $1. They basically leased it from us for a while. That arrangement didn't work out, unfortunately. We're now discussing with a private company the possibility of repurposing that building to condominiums. The concept is to add a couple of floors. The building is basically sound. The bones are good. That's the important thing to know. They've been through that building with a fine-tooth comb, and with engineers, and they're convinced that it's in basically sound condition. Otherwise, they wouldn't even dream of discussing the project with us. Will it go through? I don't know. I don't know whether the conditions they're demanding are reasonable for the town to accept, but it's something to work on and not to ignore. We'd be shooting ourselves in the foot to leave something like that on the table and not to move forward with it. So that's the plan at the moment. We'll see whether it pans out or not. At some point, if nothing works, we'll have to tear it down, but that's going to cost us $250,000 to do. That's not cheap. So if we can find a way of repurposing it, that's the best solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. O'Farrell, same question, and if you'd like me to repeat it, then let me know.
I understand, because I've looked into this myself, that there is things that are in progress for the A.D. Gray. I abut the property at the A.D. Gray School. So we had looked into the adventure of it, and then we heard that somebody was interested in it. And at this point, until that individual has determined whether they're gonna move forward or not, I really couldn't tell you what the specifics are, because I'm not involved in that part of the town.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I'm gonna ask for the first audience question. When you ask a question, please introduce yourself and come up to the podium. Everyone can probably hear you from your seat, but if you come up to the podium, then the microphone can pick it up for the recording, which will go on Lincoln County Television, so it can be watched by people who are not able to make it here tonight. Who would like to ask the first audience question? Anyone? All right, well, yes, please, go ahead.
I guess it's for both of you. What? Hi, Marcia Smolin, resident. Okay, anything else I'm supposed to do? So the question is for both of you. Very dear to my heart is the welfare of the children in Waldoboro. And I have major concerns about their welfare when it comes to their brains maturing over their years and what affects that. And I am a physician, and I have concerns about how do we go about educating our families so that they're aware that their actions and what happens during the development for their children, how much they have that impacts their children in reference to their exposure to nicotine, smoking, marijuana, alcohol, and any other drugs that are involved in the family home, that exposure to those drugs can make a huge impact on the way their children can develop and progress in school and have a wonderful life, because many of these drugs have very bad impacts on the development of a child's brain. And I was wondering what you guys would think about some way to increase the education of our families in Waldoboro in order to kind of address these kind of needs for the children. So.
Thank you.
I can go
Yes.
first. Hi, as I'm currently on the school board, I'm finding that there's a lot of poverty with these kids in town. I'm a big advocate for the backpack program, which enables each kid on a weekend to take food home. We do breakfast and lunch in the Miller School and the Warren School in the district, because these kids are not being fed properly. They have started, and through a grant, which isn't going to cost the town anything, a program through the high school, which our road chief is sponsoring right now, for the addiction. And it's not just for the children, it's for the parents on how to deal with their children with the addiction. So a lot of the times, if a child has an issue at home with an addiction, they have no one to talk to, and vice versa. So what this program is doing, it is allowing all aspects of the family to come in and speak to them and educate them the difference. Now, it's a pilot program. Hopefully it will fruit to something that, helps, but it's a start.
Mr. Butler.
I'm just thinking it's a really intractable issue, a very difficult issue in this town, and there are no easy solutions. I think the back program is a good thing to be doing. It's been done in other areas in the Mid-Coast. The one difference between what we're doing here and what they're doing in other places is, instead of having kids pick up the backpacks at the school, which could be kind of embarrassing and demeaning, they're actually delivering them to the homes. I think that's a better way of doing it. I recently attended a conference on poverty sponsored by Lincoln County, And the one thing I learned from that conference was when you think people need something, it's nice to have the thoughts, but it's more important to ask them what they need, not to tell them what they need. They will, if they have needs and they're willing to talk to you, they'll tell you what they are. And I think that's the approach we need to take. That's why I feel very strongly that a community navigator is going to be a far better way of approaching this problem than trying to deal with it only through the schools. The navigator would network with the schools, with the churches, with other nonprofits, not just in Waldoboro, but regionally as well. That's the whole point of the position. And it could be supported by grant money. It doesn't have to be supported by the town budget. But it's a really important thing to look at and think about. And I'm quite confident that we'll be talking about this the next time we have the community forum, which will be, I hope, quite soon, to follow up on everything we learned from that April 24th meeting. I hope I've been responsive to your question, Marcia. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask the next question. The selectmen voted in March to discuss the sale of the town's water utility to a private company. Should the town privatize its water utility, and why or why not? And that'll go to Mr. Butler first.
We formed a committee called the Water Department Committee. We've met once. We're going to have a meeting with the Wright Pierce engineer who put together the study of Waldoboro's water system on June 4th. It's a public meeting, anybody's welcome to come to it. During that first meeting, I have to say the sentiment seemed to be in favor of not selling it. I don't have a position personally. I want to see what the facts are and make a determination. One argument is that it reduces our liability. We're not owning it, so we're not responsible for things that happen to it. Insurance coverage is available, but when there's a catastrophe and someone walks in and does damage to your water system, and I'm speaking of damage that endangers people's lives, you look twice at that liability and decide whether you really want to have it or not. The other pro on that side is that if you do sell it, you might be able to make some money with it and use that money in other ways or other priorities in the town. The con sides seem to be that one, if it works, don't fix it, leave it alone. It's working quite well. The quality of the water folks in town are getting from that system is good. The pressure's pretty stable, contrary to what it was when the town took it over. And the insurance issue, if you look around the state and ask the MMA how vulnerable water systems in Maine are to malicious acts, the consensus seems to be that that's not a big issue. So I'm kind of sitting on the fence on this one. I'm waiting for the committee to gather the facts and then to make a recommendation to the select board. At the end of the day, it'll be the town, the voters that make the decision on this. It won't be a group of people sitting at this table. It'll be something we'll have to vote on. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy?
Hi, I got a right brain and a left brain of privatization. Because once you turn it over to somebody, you lose all your rights. You have to go by their rules, and once it's theirs, they set the guidelines. They tell you what you need to do, how much it's going to cost you to do it, and you have no say. Now, if we look at it again and maybe reevaluate it, we could decide, well, is this something that we need to reevaluate? We haven't done it in years. We've had several town managers that have been in and out, and things slip through the cracks. So maybe if we reevaluate the whole system, whether it may be to raise an account, or it may be to, because we only have 400 or 500 residents in Waldoboro that actually use the water system. But we haven't raised any rates in umpteen years either. So I think we need to get both sides before we make that decision. And I know Julie's right on top of this, and she will, make sure that the facts are there before anybody makes the decision.
Thank you. Is there another question from the audience? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to continue with my questions, but If someone has a question, you know, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll recognize you later on. So I want to move to a question about clamming in Waldoboro. Clamming is an important economic driver in this town. What do you see as the biggest challenge to that fishery, and how, if at all, should the town address that challenge? I'm sorry, that'll go to Sandy. Thank you.
Hi. I don't know all the particulars of the clamming regulations, but I do know currently that the clammers are having their clams purchased and it's being distributed. So is there a better way to do that? I can't say that because there are regulations and ordinances that I'm not familiar with because I'm not part of that committee. But I'll be willing to ask questions, I'll be willing to learn, and I guarantee you, if there's any decisions made, I'll get both sides before I make that decision.
Thank you, Mr. Butler.
The most important thing to do with the clamming industry is to make sure we keep the river clean and to make it cleaner. People talk about branding clams, we've been talking about it for years. That's a great idea. But if you're branding something, if you're branding a product that doesn't maintain its quality, you ruin your brand. And I'm somewhat familiar with branding, having run a company for 25 years that had brands. You've got to maintain the integrity of the brand, and the only way we can do that in Waldoboro is maintain the cleanliness of that river and improve the cleanliness of that river. One of the important things that's going on right now is a joint effort between Midcoast Conservancy and the Shellfish Committee. The town has taken an inventory of properties along the river. This was done back in 2012 as well, but they're updating their knowledge base. And they'll use that base of information to go in and talk to individual property owners about buffering, about creating that distance, that vital distance between the shoreline of the river and where their activity on the land begins, where their farming activity begins. That's an important piece of the puzzle, is to maintain the integrity of that buffer. That helps keep the water clean. Something else they're doing is to find sources of contamination. Some of them could be septic systems that have worn out. Some of it could be animals. There may be an issue under the bridge on Route 1. We have a lot of doves that camp out under there, and that's a potential source of, they've been getting hot readings in that particular location. So we're maybe looking at putting some netting or something under that bridge. But the important thing, the point to make here is this is really something that the Shellfish Committee is actively engaged in. They pay their own way through their own fees. They don't use your tax money to do anything. And they're very proud of that fact, and they have every right to be proud of it. So I leave this kind of things up to them. Yeah, attend their meetings, they're interesting. They're fun, and they're knowledgeable. These guys really know what they're talking about. So that's, keeping the river clean is the key for the clamming industry in Waldoboro.
Thank you. I'm gonna try one more time. Is there anyone in the audience with a question? Yes, ma'am, in the back row.
Thank you. I'm Nancy Galt. I've lived here, I think, about 7 or 8 years, and if you look at my age, you probably realize I do not have children in the schools. However, I am very, very pro-education, and I always side with the school budget. If you ask me, it's usually too low. My concern is that looking at scores and ratings of schools, ours do not rate very highly. They're near the bottom in many of the lists in the state. So my question is, how can you improve our schools within the context of what you would consider fiscal responsibility? In other words, how can you improve them and still be fiscally responsible.
Mr. Butler?
Education costs a lot of money. That's almost an inane thing to say because we all know it. But if you don't spend money on educating your kids, you're not gonna have educated kids. If you don't spend money on getting quality teachers and keep them, instead of letting towns south of us hire them away because they can offer higher salaries, you lose the continuity you need in a school. You lose the history of the institution when people leave here. Now, we're lucky. We've got a superintendent who's put together some planning. I was listening last night to Danny Jackson talk about the things the school has done since the new super has arrived. And one of them is the capital plan that he's put into place. It's really important for us. Yeah, it's very likely gonna increase our taxes as time goes on. But it's money we have to spend. I don't think the school district can be accused of wasting money. I think there are ways you can save money. You can have a good hard look at the insurance plans that the state offers to teachers in Maine. I think the physical plant that we have is, well, they're already talking about replacing it. I think that we're like 58th on the list to do that. And that position changes every year practically because some school gets in line with a greater need, so they get pushed ahead. But how do you increase the ability of the students to learn and to be educated is to keep them engaged and involved and offer enrichment programs for them. I was just at an exhibit at the Tidemark Gallery that they were self-portraits that the kids in the elementary school had made. It was amazing what they were doing. They have a great art teacher, Mr. Fogg, who gets them engaged and teaches them how to develop the confidence they need to learn on their own and to be creative. We have a tech school now that's gonna come online in September in the fall that's offering 18 different courses that teach a trade or a profession. This is an important aspect of what we're doing. I think we're striking the right course. We just need to keep the course, to maintain the way we're going, and to continue to build on the progress that we've made thus far. I don't know that the school, I think Danny said this is the first time in years the school has actually had a capital program where they're actually laying out where they see the money is required going and where it can come from. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Mrs. O'Farrell?
Hi, to piggyback off him, that comprehensive plan, and I've been part of that with this new superintendent. We got a plan set ahead for 10 years. But what has been the issue in the past, we've had 5 superintendents in 9 years. We finally have a superintendent that hope is consistent. Consistency makes a difference. His priority is bringing the teachers' wages to meet with the rest of the district, so we don't lose them. We have a new director of instruction that's young, and she was a principal for 3 years, and all 3 years she had Teacher of the Year from her school. So we are bringing the younger teachers in. We are keeping them because we're keeping the wages up there. And it's true, because we haven't really raised our taxes in the last couple of years. There is a pitfall there. We've been putting bandages on our buildings and everything, but there comes a point where we have to go forward. So with this comprehensive plan and keeping the teachers, the wages that meet the locals so that we're not losing them in this consistency in this school, I think the superintendent's on the right track. We need that consistency. And I think once we get the consistencies and the teachers that are staying, that the fiscal responsibility you're talking about will start showing. Because I think he's going to be here for a while, which is a big difference, because I like him.
Thank you. Okay, my next
Okay.
question will start with you. There's been some talk of a community center in Waldoboro, the need for a community center. Do you believe the town needs a community center? And if so, how do you envision, what do you envision that looking like? And what do you envision as the town's role in creating a community center?
I do believe in a community center for several reasons. We don't have a recreational center, so we need a place for our teenagers and our kids to go after school and be active. We also have a county that is the oldest population age-wise in the whole state of Maine. We need to offer them something. So if we had a community center, we could have elderly programs going in, senior spectrums available. There is recreational centers that would be, included with it, that they can have sports and different things for the children to keep them active and busy. So I do believe in a community center. We need to do something to offer people to come into town, to bring their kids into town. So we need to updo their education, we need to do the community center for these kids for something to do. So I do believe we do need to look at a community center versus an actual, just a recreational center.
Thank you. Mr. Butler?
I agree with Sandy. It would be good to have a community center. The question is, what kind do we want to have? And I think the concept of the community center is sort of leaning toward something a little different. You touched on it a little bit. It's something more than just recreation. We also need a new medical facility. One of the medical facilities in town is going to have to be replaced sometime sooner rather than later. There's probably a way of combining those two needs. A place where we talked about the community navigator. It would be nice to have the community navigator housed in that same location. So it's an issue that is all-encompassing and not just directed toward recreation, as you pointed out. And part of this community forum that we're having is helping us to derive the type of answer we need to determine how to go forward. The example I cite is the YMCA in Damariscotta. They were going to build a swimming pool. Probably all remember that. And they were hitting all those up for donations. Well, they held a conference very similar to the forum that we held here on April 24th. And they got all the people together and realized very quickly people didn't want a swimming pool. They wanted something very different. And if you haven't visited that YMCA recently, I encourage you to go over there. It's an amazing place. They're teaching nutrition. They provide meals. Of course, you can get exercise too. And they have outreach to social services as well. It's a far broader concept than recreation. And it encompasses more broadly the idea of community. I saw some women playing mahjong when I walked in one afternoon. The tables were right there. They were having a great time. And good socializing going on. So providing places for seniors to go, to have activities that encompass not just the kids, but all levels, all demographics in Waldoboro is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another question from the audience? Mr. Hall?
Good evening. I'm Seth Hall, 10-year resident, longtime politically active person, member of lots of boards, the planning board for more than 5 years, chairman of that, 4 years, communication technology committee with John, the renewable energy subcommittee until 2 weeks ago. I have a question about the position of committee members and board members who, for whatever reason, might run afoul of the entrenched powers that be in town or have different views about how to move the city forward, town forward. Community center is a perfect example. I was a principal proponent of the Mondomic Valley Community Foundation's effort to build a community center, which we spent $15,000 in a year and a half trying to do. I guess my question is, having been removed from all of my positions in committees and even the planning board chairmanship by a member actually running for office this election, and a two-time candidate myself for select board, what would you guys do to protect committee and board members who might have slightly different views than those of the entrenched powers that be? I don't think the particulars are important, but for example, in transparency in government, that's a big one. what can be done by the select board in particular to not only keep government open and exciting for committee members and board members, but protect people whose views differ from town management or a couple of important select board members. Thank you.
Well, I think we'll go to Ms. Butler first with that.
Fair enough. Generally speaking, the folks who participate on committees in town are valued, appreciated for the work they do, and we obviously love to keep them on the committees. Seth is pointing to 2 instances here, and I'm not gonna pull any punches on this. You've raised the topic, so I'm gonna address it. You talked about transparency, so let's be transparent, Seth. You resigned from the Renewables Energy Committee. You weren't forced off.
I did not.
Well, that's not the information I have. The second point is that you weren't reelected to the planning board by the select board, and there's a reason for that. And I'm not gonna go into that. The contributions you've made have been very, very good. The problem has been more personal than anything else. And if we had a town charter, and I guess this goes back to something Clint and I have talked about for quite a while. If you have a town charter, you can address these kinds of issues in the town charter. We don't have one. So sometimes things get personal. And sometimes they impede the work of the committee. The primary point I want to make is that if you're going to be on the committee, you have to have a working relationship with your town manager. If you don't have that and you're on the committee, it's counterproductive. And again, I'm not going to go into the reasons. I stated them in public on television at the last EDC meeting. I guess you didn't get it because here you are asking the questions again. So I don't need to repeat myself on that one.
Mrs. O'Farrell?
Seeing how I haven't been on these committees to know how they come up with their decisions, all I can say is I do believe in transparency. I think every committee reports to the select board, and I'm assuming they're open and forward with it. The select board makes the decision, and the town manager makes sure that the select board does what they've voted on. I feel that each committee has their own agenda, has their own purpose, and they have their own members. Now, how they are elected and how they are formed, I can't say. Unfortunately, I haven't made it to a lot of meetings. Due to the school board, I'm out 6 meetings a month, and they seem to coincide, so I've missed a lot of meetings. Unfortunately, they do.
Yeah, every Tuesday night we have a select board meeting.
And so a lot of times I can't make them. So for me to say specifics, I can't. I'd just be guessing. I'm sorry. But I do believe in transparency.
Thank you. Transparency is very important to those of us in the news industry.
Aye, second that.
If not, you don't tell, right?
And to be totally transparent, some of us would like a swimming pool in Davisco.
You can come to Waldeboro. No.
So, Sandy, next question is, do you support the existing ban on recreational marijuana businesses and the temporary ban on medical marijuana businesses in Waldeboro? Why or why not?
I personally don't have a personal opinion on this. Do I think they need to be regulated? Yes, and that's for the residents that are in the town. There needs to be guidelines for any type of business. So I think they should go under their own guidelines. But on a personal level, I don't have a feeling one way or the other. I'm not gonna judge somebody because they do something or they don't. You know, that's not my place. But I do think that each business has to have a guideline and they need to be followed, just like any other business in town.
Thank you. Mr. Butler?
It's been a tough question in this town. Every time we've had a vote on marijuana, it's been really close. We put a marijuana committee together, and my hope was they would come to some kind of resolution. Well, they didn't. They have a majority report and a minority report. And so the question lingers. We have passed a ban on recreational marijuana, which I favor completely. I agree with Marcia. We need to protect our kids, and we don't want to open up opportunities for them in town, in a store somewhere, or directly or indirectly, to have access to this. It is not good for their brain development. And I don't think we need it here. I mean, people can go down to Damascotta or other towns and pick this stuff up. Or they can grow it. They can grow it in their own home. If they want to have 3 plants and grow the stuff in their house, they can. I do not appreciate the moral stigma that we attach to people who use marijuana. I think that's wrong. They're adults. They know what they're doing. We don't need to judge them. Medical marijuana is an entirely different case. I know people, I have friends who use it. And they use it for medical reasons. They benefit from it. I am not going to do something that jeopardizes their ability to access what they need in town. Do we need to regulate it? Yes, that's why we have a moratorium on caregivers, right? Or, sorry, we will have a moratorium on caregivers. We have the moratorium on dispensaries and associated growing. And then we need to figure this out. But we should set aside very clearly districts in town where this activity is allowed and make sure that it is as unapparent as we can so that children are attracted to it. So that's where I fall on the issue. I don't personally use it. If I had to, for medical reasons, I would not hesitate to do so. I would look at it as an option. But when you look at it as at a social level and a legal level, it gets really complicated. That's something we need to talk a lot about. I hope we do that in ensuing meetings at the select board level when this topic will come up. It will be coming up again. The caregiver moratorium will be coming up again. So it's a tough issue. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think I saw a hand up in the back of the room over here. Yes, please.
My name is Sharon. I've lived here for over 30 years. My question's about the transfer station. I know where it comes from, that we don't recycle anything but number 2, but could we please figure out how to recycle other plastics? My bags that go down the hopper have doubled or tripled since we can't do that. I have a neighbor who's stacks of yogurt cups waiting for them to be recycled somewhere. I heard on NPR this morning that Eco Maine, and I don't know if we're a member of that or not. No, okay. They are managing to recycle plastics. So I would like to look into that again, please.
Can I
Thank
address
you.
that?
Yes, Ms. Whitler, go ahead.
It's frustrating when you spend so much time training yourself to sort your recyclables and then end up having to throw a certain portion of them into the hopper and watch them go to a landfill somewhere. I don't know whether we're going to solve our problem or not, because we continue to recycle through Lincoln County. And we do that because it's more economical than shipping our stuff down to Eco Maine or somewhere else. The hope is that when Fiberite comes on stream, this new plant in Hampton, that will become operational, they say, on July 1st. They've already started to take recyclables. They have what's called a dirty MRF. It separates the garbage into things you can recycle and things that they can use in their operation, and then things that go to the landfill. And the hope is that they're going to be recycling using 80% of the waste stream that goes into that facility. I'm now a member of the MRC board. I applied for, there was a spot open. I applied for it, and so I'm on the board now. And that gives me, and only till the end of the year. There was Chip Reeves resigned, and a position came open, and 2 of us applied for it, and I'm the lucky one who got it. So I've been to one of the meetings so far, and that's why I know a little bit about the timing of the startup of this venture. But their whole thing is to take these plastics and make products out of them to reuse them, or to use them for fuel, which they use to power their own facility. So that's the idea. They are accepting number 2 plastics generally, and they also, a lot of people don't know this, but we're accepting the hard plastics that's used to make toys. If you've seen a kid running around in a car that is pedaled, that type of plastic is still recycled as well. So the situation isn't hopeless. We're also developing markets in this country for the 1 through 7 and the 2 that will allow us to utilize that the way it was being utilized when we shipped it all to China. The big downfall on the China thing is that we were sending them dirty stuff. When you do single stream recycling, you don't keep it clean. People just don't. And who wants to get single stream recycling, plastics from single stream that aren't clean? The Chinese decided they'd had enough. Now it's shifted to Malaysia, and the Malaysians are having the same issue. We have to do it. We have to do it at the source. So I think we're doing the right thing by continuing to separate. I hope we continue to do that, and I hope people continue to have the patience for it. In the medium term, I think the solution is on the horizon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Farrell.
Okay, 2 things. So the question was about the hard plastics,
Any plastic.
any
1
plastics.
through 7.
Well, congratulations on your appointment. And I would hope that where this transfer station is opening, that our local transfer station, I'm sure there's a committee, is gonna meet and look at this to see how it would be advantageous to us financially and for our environment. So hopefully they'll be taken care of. If this is opening July 1st, then maybe it's something we should really look into.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Go ahead. Yes.
Sandy's hit on an important point.
What?
We just reestablished the Transfer Station Committee. That was disbanded when we passed the
I
new
know, and I
ordinance.
heard that you just reestablished
Right,
it, so I'm
exactly,
hoping that
yeah.
you address it.
Exactly, yeah. So one of the projects will be the one you've talked
Okay.
about, yeah.
All right, that's what I had heard. I was hoping that that would be one of the
You're in the
issues.
loop.
Thank you. Okay, so as has been mentioned here tonight, social issues such as addiction and poverty and potential solutions to those issues were the subject of a recent forum here in Waldoboro. What do you see as the town's role in addressing those issues? Sandy?
I think we need to look at the aspect of what we want, where we want our town to grow. Do we want younger families in here, because we're an older population, but we need to offer these younger families something to come into town. We need to, we have housing issues, we have employment issues. So these needs all to be part of the economic development that this town should, is looking into, from what I understand. There's committees that are addressing this, and hopefully it will be progressive. And I understand that I was part of that forum. I love the idea that Julie's done this, because it has revitalized the town. The people, the neighborhood is putting money together to revitalize the Waldorf Theater, which has been going downhill, and it's the neighborhood that's doing it, not the town, but because the enthusiasm that Julie has created has vitalized these people to want to do better for their town. So I'm hoping we're on the uprise.
Thank you. Mr. Butler?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes, social issues such as addiction and poverty and potential solutions to those issues were the subject of a recent forum in Waldoboro. What do you see as the town's role in addressing those issues?
I think the town can play a direct role in addressing them, and we are playing that role now. We're gonna have a follow-up forum. I've said this previously. I do hope it leads to the creation of the position of a community navigator, because that then allows someone who is representing the town to become directly involved and to become knowledgeable of where the problems are, to be able to discuss one-on-one with the people who are affected, and to, if you will, co-opt them down a different path of behavior. So that, and until we do this, we're not going to really begin to, we're not going to really begin to flourish as a town or as a school district. These problems drag us down. The people become aware of them. They don't want to come here. It affects the schools. It affects school resources. We're spending money we shouldn't have to spend to clean up problems that we shouldn't have. So we need direct intervention here. And I'm hoping that when we have this second forum, we'll learn more about how we wish to proceed as a town. You've got to develop a consensus on this. You can't do it alone. Julie has shown the leadership. She has the passion. I think she's on the right track. I 90% support everything she's doing. And I just want to be part of it because it's really important.
Thank you. Are there more questions from the audience? Anyone? Yes, go ahead.
I just love walking down here with a limp. I'm Betsy Worcester, and obviously I live in Waldoboro. And my question, it probably is more directed to you, Bob. I don't know what a community navigator is. And I would like some clarity on that. And my second part of this is, I see two people here that are very committed to this town. And I would hope that however this election turns out, the other person stays committed to this town. But let me hear about a community navigator first.
I don't think there's any question we're both going to be committed no matter what happens in this election. You can Google the term, community navigator. I got it. But it's what I did. Because I didn't know what a community navigator was either. A good example of one is the Booth Bay Regional, I forget the exact name of it, but it is a group that has gotten together to deal with local issues, such as the ones we're facing here. And they've gone out and hired a person who is the community navigator. If you need food, where do you go? Well, she'll tell you, or he will tell you. If you need medical services, where do you go get them? This person will tell you. If you have a problem with your car, or you need transportation, you go to this person, they tell you where to get it. If you need intervention because you have an abuse situation in your family, this person is keyed in to all of the services that help address that issue. Am I getting it across at this point?
Well, it sounds like a social worker.
A BS in social work is an important part of is an important qualification for the position. But it's more than being a social worker because it is community focused. And they obviously want you to have that experience, but you need to be it's an art form, really, it's described that way. An ability to get, if the police have somebody they pulled in for drunk driving and you know the guy's an alcoholic, don't throw him in jail. Get the community navigator involved, and that person will try to help this person get to the services and help they need. It's a very different approach to dealing with social issues. Social workers can work, if they work for the state agency, they're a social worker. We don't have an agency in town that is run by the town that provides social workers. We have some organizations in town that do that, but we don't specifically have one ourselves. One who could pull all those different threads together. Because if a person's on drugs, for example, it's not just the drugs that are the problem. The drugs are the symptom of the problem. And you need a support network for that person. You need to pull it all together so that that person gets the network of support that it needs, not just the palliative to help them get home the night they've overdosed. And I hope I've answered your question.
Sandy, do you have anything you want to add on the community navigator?
I'm not sure if I'm on board with the community navigator, and let me explain why. We have a chief of police that is very active in his town. We have local people that are very intelligent in their fields. They are very aware of their neighbors. Okay, we do have programs, and we have a website that if you have an issue that is general, because we have an addiction program in town that goes to the VFW every week for 2-3 hours. I don't know if people are aware of that or not. That is for families and children. We all, like I said, between the chief of police, there is always somebody in the town office here. So I would really have to research more into that, because I hate to expend more money for a navigator when we have a lot of other needs in town.
Thank you. I believe it's the Booth Bay Region Community Resource Council.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
is.
Yeah.
Next question. Last December, the selectmen voted to enter a lease purchase arrangement for a $1 million or close ladder truck. Do you support this decision? Why or why not? And we'll start with you, Sandy.
One thing about bringing people into town and younger groups, you need to offer them public safety. I, on a personal level, has had a fire. And I, on a personal level, have seen these firemen take ladders on backs of trucks to get on my roof. So that is definitely an issue. The particulars of why they picked this particular fire engine, I don't know. Should it have gone out to referendum to the people? Maybe. But not being part of that discussion, I'm not gonna say one way or the other or judge. But I do think we need to provide safety for the people that we want to come into town.
Thank you, Mr. Butler.
I voted for the fire engine. I make no bones about it. The one we have, the ladder truck we have, is being given away to the people who sold it to us for $2,500. They're taking it back for their museum. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more with Sandy about the safety issue. I don't want to be in the position of watching a guy climb up a roof, a metal roof, on a ladder, and then
Back of
fall 2 stories.
In the back of the
Either
truck.
either break his back or kill himself. It is safety first. These guys put their necks on the line every time they go to a fire. And I know you've personally experienced that.
Yeah.
God forbid that anybody should have to do that. That must have been traumatic, just to say the least.
But to see them climb on the roof
Yeah.
in the back of a truck with the ladder was devastating.
You shouldn't have to do, you shouldn't expect your guys to do that. If we had bought a new new ladder truck, back when we bought the used one that we paid for, we'd still have that truck. We wouldn't be buying a new one today. We'd probably be waiting another 15 years before we had to buy another ladder truck. I see the gentleman at the back nodding his head. He's absolutely right. We made a bad decision when we bought that used truck. We should have bought a new truck, should have been a Pierce, and we'd still have it. It would still be sitting in that garage over there. The one we're buying was hard to get. Most of them are twin axle, they're long, they won't fit in our fire bay. This is the only one they could locate that fit the needs of this town. You can park that truck on a hill and jack up the back end so it's level and do your work. You can make that turn up Marble Avenue, which a big, long truck wouldn't do. This one will do it. So they really studied this. They studied this for 2 years. Paul Smeltzer knows what he's doing. He made the right choice of truck, and we made the right decision to buy the truck. As far as the town vote's concerned, the town voted 4 years in a row to fund the capital account we were building to buy the truck. So to say the town didn't support the truck by vote, I think is probably a bit inaccurate. More importantly, we're buying the truck through a lease arrangement. The impact on your taxes, other than the maintenance costs of the truck, the impact on your taxes is 0. Because we're not putting any money out up front for it. We're basically taking the debt service. We're now paying it's almost over on a truck we bought not too long ago. That debt service will then go to support the ladder truck. And then there's an incremental lease cost, and it doesn't affect our taxes. We come out even on that.
Thank you. Before I ask another question, is there anyone else in the audience who has a question? I don't want anyone who hasn't asked a question to go home without their question answered. Excuse me.
That was mine, I'm sorry.
Anyone else? All right. So I'll keep going, and if someone does think of a question, just get my attention. We still have time for a few more questions. This next question, elsewhere in this building tonight, there's a public hearing about the potential creation of a tax increment financing district, or TIF. Do you support the creation of a TIF? And if so, how do you think it will benefit the town? Mr. Butler.
I do support the creation of a TIF. We have a sort of a synonym, an acronym for TIF. I mean, sorry, the wrong word. A slogan. It's Waldoboro Works. We're trying to convince people that this is a good idea because Waldoboro works. And the TIF allows Waldoboro to work. It's a savings plan. That's basically what it is. You define a district, an area of Waldoboro. It's primarily the Route 1 corridor, or businesses, new businesses are likely to come, or existing businesses are likely to make improvements to their property. If the property's values of that in that district increase, say they increase by 1,000, that's the amount of the increase, 1,000. It's the tax on that increase that goes into the savings account. What you've been taxing all along, before improvements were made, continues to go into the general fund the way it's always been. So, call it a Christmas, as you call it, a Christmas savings account, I think, Seth. That's a good way of describing what it is. We need this. If we'd done it 15 years ago, we would have had money in an account available to support infrastructure projects in Waldoboro. For example, we might have had funding available to put broadband up on Flanders Corner or Store Mountain. We might have had funds available to put in new sidewalks in the village. We might have had funds available to extend the sewer further down Friendship Road, or up 32, or down 32. But we haven't done that. I think when we put it before the voters, I think it was back in 2004, 2005, with due respect, we were a bit short-sighted. We were focusing on the pennies and not looking at the bigger picture. It's time to look at that bigger picture. It's not going to give us immediate results. It'll probably be 10 to 15 years before we see any substantial amounts building up in this fund. But we will be able to use those funds to leverage, to attract grant money for big projects. The prime example is the pier in Rockland. I think they took $250,000 from their TIF. They accrued that ability of that much money in the TIF. They leveraged that by another $1 million from grant money. If they hadn't had the $250 to start it, they wouldn't have gotten the grants. But because they had an ability to make a contribution for the project, the grants came in. And that's the idea behind this savings account, if you will, for Waldoboro.
Thank you. Mrs. O'Farrell?
I have looked into that, and I have to agree. I think it's a good idea to look forward. It's a good idea to put money ahead for specific reasons for in town. So as he's explained a little bit, I have to agree. I think it's a wonderful program, and I hope it works out in the long run.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to direct this next question back to you. Over the last 3 years, would you, from your observations, would you have differed with the Board of Selectmen's decisions on any particular matter?
Specific things, I can't actually say that there's specific things that I would go against the board, because I feel that the people have selected people to do these committees. These committees bring these information to the select board, so there is all kinds of little spiders there that I'm not aware of. There's information that I'm not aware of. But I do know as a select board, I would hope that they would look at all angles before they make that decision, which I'm assuming they're doing. But as far as anything specifically that they've made a decision on, I can't say no, I'm against it.
Thank you. Mr. Butler, you're welcome to respond, but I'm not sure if that question really applies to you.
I agree.
Okay. All right. Next question will go to Mr. Butler first. Understanding the limitations of town finances, if you could pick one new thing to invest in as a town, what would it be?
Are you talking about a capital investment?
I suppose it could be a capital project, a new building or a roads project, or maybe the addition of an employee or a department. I could be anything you want it to be.
Okay. Well, I'd invest in the community navigator. But we all know that. That would be my first priority.
Only one.
I also think it's important to extend the sewer down to the Sylvania plant. They are pumping water out of a well, aerating the water to get rid of the volatiles and the poison that's in the water. It's going to take 1,000 years to finish this, by the way. It's going to take forever. But all of that water goes either into the ground or eventually down to the river, what isn't cleaned. And I'd rather see that go into the sewer. I'm told by John Fancy that we can handle that. The hookup is expensive, but I don't know if there's a way we can force Sylvania or Leadvance to make the investment. But if we could, that's something I would advocate. It would improve the finances of the sewer district. They'd have more revenue to do more of the things they need to do. So those are two things that I would focus on.
Thank you. And same question to you, Mrs. O'Farrell. If you could pick one new thing to invest in, what would that be?
I think it would be broadband. If we want businesses in town, we need to offer them access. Right now, there's places, it's like the old dial-up. It takes you forever to get online, or you have to go down the street so you can hear somebody. So I think for us to offer people to come into town, we need to offer them broadband. We want children in town. There's a lot of internet services they need for even school functions, for their schoolwork. So I would have to say broadband, because I think it would widen our horizons on what we bring into town, and mostly businesses is what we need right now.
I'd like to go back to the Sylvania property. What role, going back to you, Sandy, what role should the town play in the monitoring and potential redevelopment of that property, and what is the best use of that property?
I heard they want to do a solar farm there, and it's a good idea. If we utilize it right, it will bring in income to the town. It will save the taxpayers money. But I understand there's surveys they're doing now and testing on the ground and everything like that there, but I do think that's a viable source there for a solar farm, or something that will bring energy into the town that we could sell out and it'll bring income.
Thank you. Mr. Butler?
Yeah, if we do anything on the Sylvania, it's gonna have to be private enterprise that does it, not the town, because the town doesn't want to assume any liability, any of the cleanup liability, any way, shape, or form, indirectly or indirectly. We just want to leave that with Osram Sylvania. Osram Licht is responsible for it. They've signed on the bottom line to take care of it, and let them pay for it. But to the extent that someone is interested in putting a solar farm in there, a group of private investors can work out a deal with Leadvance to, however they structure the deal, I think it would be a plus for the town to have distributive solar energy on that site. And it would help the folks because it would be lower cost electricity, could go to the school district, could go to the town, could go to the trailer park across from Sylvania or the residents on the street there. It's a it would be a good deal to have that.
Thank you. Mr. Hall?
Seth Hall again. A slightly different question relating to the utility district, the lead van site, and potentially the crisis or something like that. We might refer to it as with our water department. I'm curious how the candidates feel about the sale of our water department. I got here 15 minutes late. I don't know if it was talked about. And I'm also curious, particularly after the last answer, about if it were possible for a public-private investment in a municipal, a small 3 to 5 megawatt solar array on the Sylvania site to actually generate a revenue stream, but not expose us to any greater further liability, because that's covered by the EPA and the DMR for the DEP for the state. Wouldn't that make sense to explore that, to see if we couldn't either offset the mill rate in town, or control the mill rate at least, and who knows, maybe fund a new facilitator, I've forgotten the term for the guide. Is there anything wrong in particular with the town joining, as the CEI model often encourages towns to do, a public-private investment partnership for the benefit of the townspeople, I guess?
So I think we're on. I think we'll start with you, Sandy. We did have a question about the water department and the candidates' positions on the water department earlier. But if you want to summarize that and then go into the
Okay,
issue.
we
the other
addressed the water issue previously, okay, but to go on to what we left off at, as far as the privatization goes, listen, I'm not an expert on this. You guys, there's people in this audience that are experts. I would go to them for their advice on how this would benefit the town. Because if it's in our town, whether it's a tax base that we're charging them because it's privatization, or we're getting energy from them, I'm not the expert on all the fields of that. I'm not gonna pretend to be. But I do know that because of the people that are aware of this, as far as a privatization, that would have to do with the town. I'm not part of that decision-making at this point. But I don't think it's a bad idea to do something with that part. But he says the town's not at that position, but privatization is different, which we have guidelines for businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Butler.
I don't have any, philosophically, I'm not opposed to a private-public cooperation in projects. We have a semblance of that with the solar array that's sitting over in the transfer station. But I'd really be careful about the Sylvania site. When we first came to Waldoboro, we talked to Sylvania. It was Sylvania at the time, and we were thinking of maybe renting some of the building that was still there for our business and leasing some of it. So they sent us a lease agreement, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, they were making us responsible for everything, including the whole cleanup. That was their attitude. These guys are mercenary when it comes down to the legal finer points. They'll get you any way they can. So I'd be very, very leery of joining in any joint venture, public or private, with regard to the Sylvania site. I'd rather let the professionals take care of that. And if they want to invest money in a solar array, or Leadvance does, and maybe sell the power to us, that's great, but I wouldn't want to put our money into it.
Thank you, and at this time, I'm going to go without any more audience questions, and having asked all of my own, I'm going to go into closing statements, starting with Mr. Butler.
Got a short closing statement.
Me too.
Thank you, JW, for working to put this event together, and thank you to members of the audience for attending it. This year, the voters of Waldoboro have another real choice to make between two very different approaches to solving problems facing our town. My approach is to find common ground, to build consensus, and come up with a plan, to vet the plan to make sure everyone understands it, and then to implement it. I have a proven record of taking on difficult tasks, of working through the issues, and then moving forward. I would look forward to an opportunity to continue working with the other 4 members of our Select Board to accomplish that. For that reason, I ask for your vote on June 11th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I've always been a go-getter and good at getting things done. I'll work with the board, our town manager, and all involved parties, as I have always worked with people. Hear all sides, not afraid to ask questions, and be willing to learn. I can promise you fiscal responsibility. Tax revenue isn't monopoly money that you can just throw away. It is hard-earned, just as you are responsible for your family budget. I can promise you I'll exercise the same responsibility with our town budget. Regardless of which one of us wins, remember that the measures already approved by the entire select board will be continued and implemented by the board. It is our goal to honor the board's prior decisions and continue to move Waldeboro forward in a way that makes us proud and competitive. Remember, Tuesday, June 11th is Election Day. I'll be honored to be a member of the Select Board and hope you'll vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, I just want to thank the town of Waldeboro and everyone who's here tonight. I'm really grateful to be here tonight and be a part of this discussion. And to the candidates, thank you again for your participation and good luck to both of you. Have a good night.
Thank you, JW. Thank you.